Hello, my name is Cato, and today I'm gonna bring you an adventure showcasing what's left of the old Lulu Island Line. So, with my GoPro ready and my camera, let's get started. So this is the Kitsilano Trestle Bridge, or at least what was left of it anyways. Constructed in 1886, it was used and built by the CPR to connect its Arbutus Line and Granville Island lines to their proposed port north of Kitsilano, which would have been over there. Unfortunately, due to the railway's decision to locate their yards north of Falls Creek, which is now modern-day Yaletown, approximately over there, that meant that the bridge experienced seldom use. It wasn't until 1905 when the BCER electrified and leased the line to run the interurban trams on. The bridge would later be demolished in 1982. So moving on from the Kitsilano Trestle Bridge, we're now underneath the Bar Street Bridge. The interurban trams would have come off of the Kitsilano Trestle Bridge, and at the end of the day, they would have come here to terminate. This was where the Kitsilano tram yard was located. Here, many trams were serviced, built, and ultimately met their demise. In the 1940s, GM introduced their Rails to River campaign. What that meant was they wanted to replace streetcars for trolley buses. They argued that the streetcars were an outdated form of technology and that buses were overall better. So in the 50s, the BCER started to destroy all of their interurbans, all of their trams, and all of their freight cars.
Now, there's one of the Niles baggage cars, been all stripped of all the metal inside, the brass, so it's all taken out of it. And they got a couple of cables on her. She's pretty rickety too now. She won't give up though. There, she's going to go to sleep now. See all the streetcars along them behind there. This is taken at Kitsilano Barns where they scrapped all the cars and burnt them. And there's a string of streetcars there all ready for the same fate. Now they've torched it now. Away she goes. That shot of the line car taking the wire down was sad, but this is the saddest one to me. Of course, my father was a retired BC Electric motorman on the Marpole-Steveston line, and I was on there for a while. My brother-in-law retired from the BC Electric. He was a dispatcher. So it's kind of in the family.
Likewise. My father was also on the transit side, not on the interurban rank, but on the city streetcar lines as a motorman and an instructor and a supervisor, etc. So I guess it runs in the family and it's in the blood, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. But this film is just, I just can't believe that somebody's had this so long and I hadn't seen it. There's not much left. Or I guess that wood was so dry, this would be about, I guess it'd be about 40 years old, I guess. They were built around approximately 1910, and this would be about 1950 or... They would have all had to been rebuilt, and then they were actually obsolete because there were so many faster and lighter cars. So it had been very, very expensive to rebuild them or buy brand new ones at that time. Things are getting pretty hot around there by the look of that fire hose. It's right below Burrard Bridge. There's one of the old wooden freight motors by the looks over there. He's probably ready for the burn too, for the torch.
That freight motor, you thought that was a snow sweeper, you know, that had the bamboo brushes and was used to clear the tracks. Anyway, I guess this is the end of the line totally for the Fraser Valley.
With that being said, let's go see what's left of the tram, shall we?
So we shall.
This is Nathaniel.
Hi.
So, after like half an hour of biking, fire pulse. So I was supposed to show a time lapse or a montage of the RBS line. However, all of my footage got corrupted, and they're all unusable. So now that I'm at the Seat and Tram Museum, I'm going to tell you some history about the BCER. So, to understand the story of the BCER, we must go all the way back to the beginning. February 22nd, 1890. That's when the National Electric Tram Company and Lightning Company Limited launched the first ever streetcar service in Victoria. Following that, the Vancouver and Westminster Tram Company launched New Westminster's first streetcar system on October 8th, 1891. And the Vancouver New Westminster Interurban Line via Central Park in Burnaby was created in the same year. With the global depression in the 1890s, all three companies were put into receivership, and they were amalgamated into the Consolidated Railway and Light Company. The three companies were put into receivership again when there was a streetcar accident at Point Ellis Bridge, which resulted in 55 deaths and a lot of people getting injured. And they were reorganized into the British Columbia Electric Railway Company Limited. So under BCER ownership, there were 5 main lines in the Lower Mainland. There was the Lulu Island Line, which ran from steveston to downtown Vancouver. There was the Westminster Eburn Line, which went from Marple, current day Marple, to New Westminster. There was the Central Park Line, which went from downtown all the way to New Westminster. Burnaby Lake Line, which went from Vancouver to Burnaby. And there was the Chilliwack Lake Line, which ran from New Westminster all the way to Chilliwack. So what remains of these old interurban lines? Well, the Central Park Line is what the Expo Line currently follows. The Burnaby Lake Line is what the Millennium Line squadron follows. The Chilliwack Lake Line is now being partially used by Southern Railway. Westminster Eburn used to be in service, however, in the past couple of years it's been abandoned and decommissioned. And the Lulu Island Line, well, you'll learn about that more later. So the BCER not only supplied power and electricity and transit to these communities, they created communities as well. So if you look over here, you see these red lines. These were old streetcar lines. Now, what is a streetcar and what is an interurban? So an interurban, for example, this one over here, ran from city to city. So Vancouver to Lulu Island, or from New Westminster all the way to Chilliwack. They were much bigger and they were much faster and they were capable of higher speeds. A streetcar, however, ran from city to city. So, for example, New Westminster to New Westminster, or Vancouver to Vancouver. They never left the cities, and they were roughly 2/3 to 1/2 the size of an interurban. So what did I mean when I said that the BCER created communities? Well, you see, the Metro Vancouver area was really built around the tram. So let's say, for example, Kerrisdale or maybe Hastings. The reason why those are so popular today is because there was an old streetcar line or an interurban line running through there. What would happen is that BCER would announce, hey, we're gonna create a line here. And then people would hear that and they'd be like, oh, that's so cool. And then they would flock there to start businesses, build homes, and whatnot. Up until then, most of the Fraser Valley area was just farmland. But when the tram was introduced, people were able to gain access to the big city, and shipments from here were able to get to here and here from here. And thus it kind of brought city life to this, at the then pretty much remote, just farmland, Fraser Valley area. As for the development of, let's say, Richmond, we will get onto that later. Actually, we'll get onto that now. Well, we finally made it. End of the line. So we reached the end of the bike path. But is it the end of the line? No. Let's keep going. So how did the tram get across the Fraser River? Wow. They used the Marple Bridge. So this is the Marple Bridge, or at least the remnants of it. As you can tell, it's missing the middle bit. It was constructed in May of 1902 by the CPR, the Canadian Pacific Railway. They used it to haul freight and workers to and from Steveston to Vancouver. That's actually where the term the Sockeye Special or Sockeye Express actually came from, as they ran only twice daily. In 1905, the British Columbia Electric Railway, or BCER as it's more commonly known, electrified and leased the line. They later created a line to and for New Westminster, and then following that, a line from Vancouver to Marple, a line from Marple to Steveston, and a line from Marple to New Westminster. During its early years, the Steveston tram ran hourly. Freight largely comprised of smaller loads such as milks and eggs. The route proceeded southbound from the bridge along today's Garden City Road and west along Granville Avenue, before turning south onto Railway Avenue. The steel swingspan railway bridge linked Marple, at the time it was called Eburn or North Eburn, with Richmond, and the then important community port and canneries at Steveston. Marple Bridge served the Lulu Island Line, or as it was more commonly known as, the Marple-Steveston Line. The Marple-Steveston Line, or the Steveston Line as it was called, was the longest lasting tram line in Metro Vancouver history. The final run of these streetcars and interurbans was on Sunday, April 24th, 1955, from 1 to 5 p.m. The last ever interurban tram ran on February 28th, 1958. Due to the proximity of several bridges on the Fraser River, the unique signal for opening the then called British Columbia Electric Bridge on the north arm was 4 long and 2 short blasts on the vessel's horns. As you can see here, this was one of 2 old control rooms. However, it's seen better days to say the least. So now that we've crossed the bridge, as you can see there, bridge, here's some facts about Marple Bridge. In 1967, it was hit by a barge hitting wooden chips. Oh hey, look, a skytrain. In 2014, a fire started by likely vandals destroyed a 100-meter section of the trestle-treated wooden trestle approach on the Marple side. The thick smoke temporarily closed the Oak Street Bridge and impacted Vancouver International Airport flights. In 2016, after a barge collision that year, again, CP finally removed the swingspan within a few days and is platform 2017. As of now, the tracks north and south of the bridge sit unused. They have been teared up and, well, no longer being used. Well, we're here again. I'll show you why.
Breaking news this evening, a huge fire has broken out in Richmond, closing down Oak Street Bridge.
Smoke still smoldered Friday morning after a massive fire in Richmond.
I was really listening to a podcast, I was into it, and all of a sudden I look up and there's just black smoke everywhere.
Now to that massive fire that saw a piece of Richmond history go up in a towering plume of smoke.
Metro Vancouver, the regional district, has issued an air quality bulletin for much of the Lower Mainland. If the smoke is affecting you, you're advised to move indoors, close windows and air intakes.
So as you guys saw earlier in the video, I was here. And now we're here again. Some bad things happened. So on Thursday, June 20th, 2024, Marlborough Bridge unfortunately suffered another fire. Instead of being burnt on the north side, such as in 2014, it was set on fire on the south side. Local business owner Stefan Kloffenberg was working in the parking lot of his business before he spotted the smoke in the sky. He quotes, "While I was standing there and on the phone with fire rescue, a transformer exploded and shot like blue spark and stuff around. Within 10 minutes of calling the Richmond Fire Department, 4 fire engines had been dispatched and had arrived on the scene." Grant Wainberg, Assistant Deputy of Richmond Fire Department, states that the terrain and the materials involved have made for a very challenging fire to extinguish completely. So the fire started when allegedly a transformer blew up in the old marina and dock building, which is, well, it was over there. Fire and rescue were able to extinguish the flames on the abandoned dock marina. However, they were unable to reach the flames on the trail itself. So they had to call in a fireboat from Vancouver Fire and Rescue. However, that boat did not arrive until midnight. The fire was officially put out on the morning of Friday, June 21st. So Marlborough Bridge is creosote treated, as was many things back in its era when it was built. So what is creosote? Well, essentially it makes things more water resistant, but makes it more flammable, which explains why the smoke in the sky that day was completely just black. The fumes are very toxic. However, unfortunately, there were lots of people who were just standing around, bystanding and filming. So what is the fate for this now century-old bridge? Well, only time can tell. Either it'll be left sitting here again for the next 50, 100 years, or it will finally be demolished. The unfortunate part is, being 122 years old, this is one of 3 remnants of the original Lulu Island Line, which technically makes it the largest artifact that we have in Richmond, aside from our tram at Steveston. Now we're gonna head down and see what is left of the bridge. Obviously, I won't be going onto the bridge, but might as well, you know, get as close as we can to it. Now, obviously, you as a viewer, you cannot smell, but this smells awful. Fumes are absolutely... I'm getting a headache from this, actually. Everything here is just dry and like ash. Alright, we're getting out of here. It smells too way too bad. We are over here. Where we want to go is down over here. So on the Lulu Island Line, there were 19 stations. The first station into Richmond would have been Tuck Station. Stations in Richmond were typically named after either rich businessmen, Richmond pioneers, or people who donated land to the BCER. Some examples would be Brakehouse Station, named after Samuel Brakehouse, Blundell, Francis, and Steveston. So as we're walking, you'll notice, oh hey, there's 2 lines. Which one do we go to? This one. This would have led to the Van Horn Spur. That shut down around 2016. However, we're going down this one. So after about 10 seconds of walking, we've now reached current day Bridgeport Station. Now, would it surprise you if I told you that this was not where the original Bridgeport Station was? It was way down over there. So after coming down Marlborough Bridge, they would have stopped at Tuck Station, which was over here. They would have come down here and then proceeded southbound along current day Garden City. So this is approximately where the Lansdowne Park track station would have been. See, back in the day, there were two famous racetracks in Richmond. There was the Breakhouse track, which is now Mineral Racetrack, and there was the Lansdowne Park track, which is now current day Lansdowne Mall. Lansdowne Mall had its own special, I guess, spur line, where the trams would go from there and then turn all the way to their own line and then to the station. Horse racing was a pretty popular thing back in the day, so whenever there was a race night, there would be special trams dispatched to wait at the stations to collect people after the race was finished. They would often don the destination role. Well, it would say either special or racetrack. So if you live in Richmond, you might wonder, why is Garden City and Granville so weird? Why is it such a big curve? Well, that's because there was never supposed to be a road here. This used to be train tracks. Garden City Station would have been over here, and it would have continued westbound on Granville. So this was where the original Breakhouse station was located. All these buildings on this side, these are all original buildings from that era. They're the last buildings from that era, actually. There would have been a siding over here where the trams would have waited if there was an outbound train coming or if a CPR train coming. And this was where the old City Hall was. So as I said earlier, there were two racetracks in Richmond, Lansdowne Park and Mineral. They were both used for horse racing, but they were also used as airports back in the day, well, during the war at least. There were also car races there, and a flurry of other racing-related activities that were hosted here. Obviously the track isn't here anymore, but it used to go all the way down to over there where the City Hall was. It was a really big track, but it was torn down in 60s, 80s. Now it's just a runner track. So this is Railway Avenue. As you can see, there's a curve. Why is there a curve? Well, trains can't really turn at a 90-degree angle, so they had that turn. So the lack of footage not only is it limited to the Arbutus line, it's also, well, Richmond, because I am such a good videographer. So let's talk about the Lulu Island Line. Having been originally CP's Lulu Island Line, it was used at the beginning to transport freight and workers to and from canneries. Having been electrified by 1905, the BCER ran 3 trams: Eburn, Steveston, and Burnaby. They will later be renamed or renumbered to 1206, 1207, and 1208 respectively. The line operated until February 28, 1958, when the BCER's lease on the CPR's line finally ended. Funny thing about that, Richmondites were actually able to convince the BCER to keep the line running for an additional 3 years, as they went as far as to go to the BC Supreme Court in Vancouver to advocate and, well, keep the line running. Built between 1912 and 1913, this tram is over 112 years old. Being a double-ender with 2 controls on either end of the tram, that meant that the seats also had to move back. So how did they do that? Well, the conductor would take the handle and pull it this way. It's similar to today's SkyTrain or Expo Line or Millennium, whichever one you take. However, these seats, they move. The current day ones don't. So moving down along the tram, we are now in the smoking section. The smoking section was primarily used, well, it was only used for smokers. If you were a woman, you typically wouldn't have been in here as it was considered unladylike, and you probably would have been kicked out. You notice that these are made out of wood and not rattan, like the chairs over there. That's because the cigarettes would have destroyed the material with all their smoke. Also in the smoking section, there's these little lighter things that you could use to light up your cigarette with. So what many people don't realize is these, at the end of the day, they were workhorses, which is why so many pictures online you see of these old trams, they're either dirty or they look like they're falling apart. But that's just because the BCER was like, hey, we need to get people from point A to B. We don't need it to look clean, we just need to get people moving. So that's why they rarely ever, well, probably fix these up. Towards the latter end of the BCER's rail lifespan, they would begin cannibalizing existing trams. So for example, if this tram was slightly out of service and it had spare parts like maybe this light bulb, they could replace it on another tram. Soon enough, all these trams would be stripped of anything useful, and once they were done of being useful, they would have been burnt or scrapped, or both. Some were saved, most were burnt. The ones that did survive, a lot of them don't remain to this day. However, there are some that still remain to this day. So what or where are these surviving interurban trams and streetcars? Well, of the 457 streetcars, there are only 3 remaining from the BCER era. Of the 72 interurbans, there are only 7 remaining. Those streetcars are number 53, which is actually at the old spaghetti factory in Gastown in downtown Vancouver. There is streetcar 400, which was an old Victoria car at the Nelson Tram Society. There is also streetcar 153 at Manova, the Museum of North Vancouver. So what about the interurbans? Well, first of all, there's tram 1220, which is at the Season Tram Museum. There is the 4 trams at Cloverdale, which are 1207, the original Steveston. There is 1225, 1223, and 1304, nicknamed the Connaught, as that was the Duke of Connaught's personal tram. There is tram 1223 at the Burnaby Village Museum, which is actually the sister tram of 1220. Lastly, there is tram 1235, which is at the Canada National Science and Technology Museum in Ottawa. Sadly, that is the only interurban that we know of that has still not been restored yet. So of the 28 1200 class interurbans, which the BCER ordered in 1912 and received in 1913, only 5 of them remain. While this does mean that we still have some surviving examples of the interurbans around, it means that we don't have any of the other, well, classes of interurbans, so such as the 1000 classes or the 1100 classes. We do have one 1300 class, which is the Duke of Connaught Royal Tram, which I just talked about. But it means we don't have any of the trams which would have ran on the Chilliwack line. So any of the freight cars, such as the 1700 classes, the 1600 classes, even the 1500 classes, those trams, those are much bigger. They were also much faster, more powerful. Some of them even had their own washrooms. So as I mentioned earlier, that many of the interurban streetcars, their fate was to be burnt or scrapped. But many of them were also repurposed into chicken coops, work sheds, and some even were turned into diners. So what can you expect at the Season Tram Museum? Well, is a fully restored, not operational however, interurban tram, built in 1912 or 1913. Depends on how you look at it. There's also interactive displays, such as this. You can ring the bell, you can see how the coin changer used to work, or the handbrake. There's also some infographics, like this one over here, which shows how transportation has evolved over the years. There's also a timeline on the wall, and a section dedicated to the restoration of 1220. The people you see on the wall here, those are the ones who helped restore this tram back in 2013-2016. There's pictures here that you can look at of during the restoration and of the tram when it was still in service. And finally, there is this big map wall. This map wash shows all of the lines which used to run, well, all the interurban lines which used to run in Metro Vancouver. So for example, the Lulu Island Line. You press this, the light turns on, and you can see where it goes. Let's try another one. The Chilliwack Line. Press this, and then you see the lines. So with all that said and done, we will return to this later. However, we are not gonna go back to the biking because I still need to do that part. So as we're going down this bike path, we're gonna go to a very special place. A place which houses one of the original trams. So where we are now is actually where the old McCallum station was. There's a timetable here that actually shows the original schedule. It's not in a very good state, but it's here. We have now reached Francis Station. So back in the day, there were 21 stations on the Lulu Island Line that spanned from Bridgeport all the way to Steveston. It actually took about 57 minutes to get from Steveston to downtown Vancouver, which is debatably quicker than currently transit systems. We have reached Woodward Station. So we've now reached Collegiate Station. 3 more stations and we get to the end of the line. We've now reached Branscombe Station. 2 more until the terminus station. Let's keep going. So this would have been the last station before the, well, last station, season Y. Now, what is a Y? A Y, well, it was shaped like a Y. It was used so trains or locomotives could turn around. Think of it as like a junction or like a static turntable almost. Look, railway tracks and a stop sign. I think we're getting close. So after following the bike path, well, we're at the end of the line. But there is one more thing to check out. The Steam Tram Museum. So now that we're here, let's go inside. Hi, Gabrielle.
Hey, Cato. Come on in. It's good to see you again.
You too.
Well, welcome to the Steveston Tram and the centerpiece of our exhibit here, Tram Car 1220. One of the interurban trams, the big trams that used to run between communities here in the Lower Mainland, and especially here in Steveston, that went all the way to Vancouver, connecting Richmond to the rest of the world. These trams were driven from either end by a driver called a motorman. And then there was also a conductor who looked after the passengers, took money from them, gave them tickets, made sure that everything was okay and they got off at the right stop. The motorman would stand or sit in the vestibule, depending on which end he was driving in, and they were all men. There was never any women motormen. And they had an accelerator here. They also had a brake that they would take off and then walk to the other end, and they also had a key that looked something like a wrench, and they would take both of those and move those two between the ends, so nobody could just suddenly come up and start driving the tram. So why do we have the tram on display? Why did we invest money in restoring this beautiful 1912 interurban? Well, that was because it tells a really important story in Richmond's history, Richmond's development. And that was the tram spanned a time between the age of the horse and buggy and the age of the motor car. And this transportation network, the rail network it ran on, really helped to define our community. Houses, businesses, schools, they all sprang up along the rail line. And this was a defining moment in the development of Richmond's history. So what happened? How come we don't have trams anymore? Well, they reached their pinnacle in 1944, and that year there was something like over 144 million rides across this whole transit system. We had this incredible transit system right across the Lower Mainland, and After the Second World War ended, people wanted cars. They started to move into suburbs that didn't have rail lines. They wanted the prestige and the convenience of being able to go when they wanted to rather than waiting for a tram to come by. And you can see here, this is one of the newspapers we have in the tram. You know, there were ads everywhere for cars. And well, that helped to end the age of the interurban trams, the age of the streetcar in this area. And unfortunately, what happened was that they took these hundreds of trams and streetcars and they burned them. They got rid of them. And instead they built roads, they put down buses, and we bought cars. And so the age of the tram ended for Richmond and for the Lower Mainland.